Five Nights at Freddy's has a huge story, and understanding where it all fits together can be pretty difficult. Not to mention there are several books, games, and now a movie which all have overlapping elements and stories. And with the brand new game Help Wanted 2 coming up, now's a great time to go over the full timeline for new and old fans alike. And brace yourselves and get ready, because there are some pretty crazy things in this timeline coming up, and you'll need to watch this right through to the end, so you're not going to want to miss any of this. The story begins with William Afton and Henry Emily, both being two men with experience in and passion for robotics. Together they open a Chuck E. Cheese style restaurant called Freddy's Family Diner, featuring springlock suits, a new invention which they created. These are animatronic suits whose internals can be manipulated so the suits can be worn by employees as mascot costumes. However, these springlock suits were extremely dangerous, because when the suit was in mascot mode, all the internals, electronics, metal was basically turned into an exoskeleton using a springlock mechanism. If these springlock mechanisms failed when the wearer was inside, they would be impaled with all the metal, animatronics, and circuitry, leaving them extremely maimed and potentially even killed. Nonetheless, Freddy's Diner was extremely popular, and the restaurant featured two characters, Freddy, which is a golden bear, and Spring Bonnie, which was a golden bunny. Both the men have families. Henry has a daughter named Charlotte, or Charlie. We don't actually know about his wife, and William is married with 3 children named Michael, Elizabeth, and a son, which we're going to call Evan, the crying child. All of which play an absolutely huge part in the stories coming up. Now, the original Freddy's Family Diner got so popular that by 1983 it had its own TV show, and William and Henry decided to start a new restaurant chain called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza under the name and brand Fazbear Entertainment. Freddy Fazbear's introduced new characters such as Foxy, Chica, Bonnie, and the man himself, Freddy, whilst also being able to use the original springlock suits from Freddy's Family Diner, as both were operating at the same time. That point is very important and something we'll talk about in a minute. Now, Henry was the main brains of the operation. He's the one who did all the robotics. He even made a puppet animatronic which would look after his little girl while he was at work so she wouldn't wander off. And while William wasn't as hands-on with the robotics side as Henry was, that doesn't mean he didn't have a passion for it. He loved robotics, he just wasn't as good as Henry. No, he was more the business side of things, and he didn't come without his issues. He absolutely loved Henry on the one side, but hated him on the other for being better than him at robotics. He wanted to be the one, but no, it was Henry. And slowly but surely, this jealousy turned into rage, hatred for his business partner, and one night, he saw an opportunity to strike back, to get the upper hand over Henry. He will show him who's boss. And on one rainy night, he happened to see Charlotte Emily trapped outside Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and conveniently, the puppet was trapped inside his box. Feeling all the jealousy and rage come to a head, he gets out of his car and kills Charlotte Emily right outside Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Well, in the alley anyway. As she lay there dying in the alleyway, the puppet breaks free from its box, and because of its programming, tries to go and rescue Charlie and bring her back inside, but because of the rain, it collapses on Charlie's body. Now, in Five Nights at Freddy's, emotions tend to linger in the environment, and the most powerful emotion is agony. Now, these emotions tend to get absorbed by the environment, especially metals, such as what was in the puppet. And when these emotions get absorbed by the metal, it turns into something called remnant. Now, remnant is extremely special. It anchors the spirit to a vessel and enables it to function with an infinite source of power. But also, when remnant is extracted, it could be used to heal someone beyond the point of death. So when the puppet collapsed on Charlie, her emotions, her agony reacted with the metal, creating remnant. This then bound the spirit of Charlie to the puppet, and also created the crying streaks we see on its face where there were none before. Further to this could be the first recorded event of one of the shadows being born, Shadow Bonnie, but I'll expand and explain all that later on. Charlie's father, Henry, launched a massive search when she never came home. Her body was found in that alleyway. Whilst we know what happened to Henry's child, we haven't talked about the 3 others of William Afton: Elizabeth, Michael, and the crying child, or Evan Afton. Now, Evan really liked the animatronics at first, and in fact, he would actually sneak away from their family home to watch them at the restaurant. And one night, he hears a knocking at the window. It's Shadow Bonnie. Shadow Bonnie smashes the window and demands he follow him to the restaurant to show him where Charlie was killed. While this was happening, William Afton was on his way back. He gets home, sees Michael in the chair watching the TV, where Michael tells him to go easy on his younger brother. Afton heads to Evan's room, which is locked, and he is not happy about this. He goes round the back and finds the broken window, along with a bunny-shaped paw print in the floor and Evan's footprints leading towards the restaurant. William, who's clearly mentally unstable, vows that his son will pay for this when he returns home. Oh, and he did pay. with his life. But before we get to that stage, a little explaining is in order. Now, Shadow Bonnie was able to come to the crying child's house because Shadow Bonnie manifested when Charlie was killed. All her agony was left over and took the form of her killer, William Afton, aka Spring Bonnie. This shadowy form then wanted to show the killer's son, the crying child, what his father had done. But the crying child, upon returning to the house, his father had other plans for him. You see, William Afton had done some research of his own. He's seen the Spring Bonnie tracks outside his son's window. He noticed that the puppet wasn't quite itself anymore and was unnatural, so decided to research it. And he figured out what Remnant was. Well, not fully, because he didn't understand how to make it. He assumed it was fear which created this energy, this remnant, so decided to experiment, creating an underground bunker below his house and experimenting on his child. And he did this by creating hallucination gas and using it on his child to see if fear would be strong enough to create this remnant he was looking for. For the experiments, the crying child would be put under the effects of the hallucination gas, which would produce nightmare versions of the animatronics in a home-style environment trying to kill him. Needless to say, when he wasn't under the effects of the hallucination gas, this manifested into real fears of the real animatronics. This had left him mentally scarred, hence why he was crying all the time and the name the crying child. His older brother Michael, now being a teenager, had seen his crying brother crying all the time and thought this would be a great chance to prank his crybaby brother. Michael's pranking only got worse and worse until it escalated on the day of the crying child's birthday, where they were at the restaurant and Michael and his friends decided to prank him by picking him up and putting him inside the mouth of a performing Fredbear animatronic. This resulted in the bite of 83, despite the popular meme, the bite of 87. The bite was so gruesome that it put the child in a coma and was sent to hospital, where he later died. But Charlie, who's now possessing the puppet, vowed that she would put him back together, and thus used the crying child's essence, which was left over in the animatronic from the bite, to put the crying child's soul inside of Golden Freddy. All of this and the shadow variants will become clear later on. And for clarity, that bite actually took place in Fredbear's Family Diner, not Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Because of this horrific incident, they actually shut down Fredbear's Family Diner, but Freddy Fazbear's Pizza remained open, despite having extremely low attendance numbers. William Afton was now no longer able to run experiments on the crying child, so would need new ways in able to capture this essence/remnant. But in order to do that, he actually needed test subjects, so he designed a bunch of animatronics that were able to go out and actually capture children. Because after all, just like the bite of 83, if an animatronic did the killing, he wouldn't be able to get the blame. So he set up Circus Baby's Pizza World, starring the Funtime animatronics, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and Circus Baby. He specifically built Circus Baby to look like his daughter Elizabeth, who was able to basically isolate, capture, and kill children. Elizabeth was fascinated with the animatronics, especially Circus Baby, despite her father warning her never to go near them or be alone with them. So, on opening day, she wanders off, finding herself alone with, guess who? Circus Baby. And I guess you all know what comes next.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Circus Baby basically splits her in half like a chicken wing, killing her in the process. And just like when Charlie was killed with a puppet, something different happened with Elizabeth and Circus Baby. Elizabeth's soul fused with Circus Baby, and look, as you can see, Circus Baby's eyes are blue, Elizabeth's are green. When Elizabeth goes inside Circus Baby, her eyes then become green. Oh wow, what a coincidence. Circus Baby's, however, was promptly shut down before it even opened under the ruse of a gas leak, and all the animatronics William had built was then put into storage in his secret underground bunker, where he'd done his experiments. So at this point, William no longer has animatronics to go out and lure children, Fredbear's Family Diner was closed, the Springlock suits were retired, and the only thing which remained was a dwindling Freddy Fazbear's Pizza restaurant. So he decided to take things into his own hands. If he was not able to use animatronics to get the kids, he would get them himself. So on June 26, 1985, he took the old Spring Bonnie costume out of storage and lured 5 children into the back room of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where he murdered them and stuffed their bodies into the 4 main animatronics who were still barely operating at this stage: Freddy, Foxy, Chica, and Bonnie. And in doing so, gave life to the animatronics because of the remnant infusing into the metal. This basically completed his experiment and confirmed what he basically already knew at this stage: that Defs was creating remnant with the metal of the animatronics. Obviously, 5 children going missing didn't go unnoticed. The police were called, they searched Freddy's but found nothing because they were stuffed inside the animatronics. William was arrested but later let go because of lack of evidence. This entire incident is referred to as the MCI, or the Missing Children's Incident of 1985. Now, the remnant itself inside the animatronics along with the kids' bodies wasn't enough to bring these animatronics to life. Luckily, the puppet was present in this location with Charlie, and just like she did with Golden Freddy and the Crying Child, she brought the 4 animatronics and the 4 kids' souls together and to life. Give gifts, give life. This entire incident sparked the entire closure of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, so at this point, we've had Freddy Fazbear's Pizza close, Fredbear's Family Diner, and Circus Baby's Pizza World. And now with the company facing bankruptcy, they needed a new way to raise money, so they decided to reopen Circus Baby's as an entertainment and rental company. This was operating and set up in William Afton's underground bunker. Now, William Afton himself had already had a lot of controversy surrounding him, having been arrested for child murder, so he wasn't allowed to actually operate himself in the bunker. Nevertheless, he needed to be in there, so he used his son Michael Afton to continue his work and his experiments. It's at this point where William Afton would actually change his name so he's able to work in the future uninterrupted and unscrutinized. But more on that later on. Let's focus now on his son working in the underground bunker. At this point, Michael Afton realizes his father is a little bit corrupt. He sees his sister inside of Circus Baby, a whole host of animatronics trying to kill him because they think he's his father, and a super animatronic called Ennard who scoops out Michael Afton's inside so they could basically use his skin and body as an escape mechanism to escape the bunker. At this stage, Ennard has now escaped the bunker and is wandering around town, much to the disgust of everybody around him. But Michael's body slowly starts to decay. At this point, Ennard projectile vomits himself into the sewers, leaving a decaying Michael corpse on the floor. But as we know with the Aftons, they always come back, and Michael did just that. Because it turns out the scooper is more than just scooping out body parts from the inside of a human being. You see, William Afton was experimenting with the scooper and was using the scooper to inject remnant into animatronics which didn't have a soul inside of them. So when the scooper was used on Michael Afton, it injected him with remnant, thus bringing him back to life. Because as I said earlier with Charlie and the puppet, remnant can bring someone back from the brink and even past the point of death. So Michael, now realizing what his father was up to in the bunker, vowed to get revenge for his sister, himself, and for his younger brother. But tracking his father down turned out more difficult than he expected because his father had changed names various times and was off here, there, and everywhere in a way to get more remnant. And speaking of him getting more remnant, Fazbear Entertainment decided to relaunch the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza with a brand new pizzeria, and William saw this as a massive opportunity to get more remnant. So with his now fake name, he applied as a security guard position at the brand new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and he got the job. But there was a massive problem for him. The original kids he'd killed in the original animatronic suits, now withered, were brought to this brand new pizza location, and to top it all off, they also had new animatronics, toy animatronics, which had access to criminal databases to stop any predators or any nasty people coming in. So not only did he have the original animatronics which recognized him, he also had brand new toy animatronics which saw his face on a criminal database. And the original Charlie puppet from the original location was also taken out of storage and put into this location. Needless to say, things were pretty rough for William Afton, and rightly so. Oh, but this didn't stop him. He launched a string of complaints and eventually he was switched from the night shift to the day shift. And this is where we bring in the other security guard, Jeremy Fitzgerald. But the animatronics, on the other hand, it didn't matter if it was Fitzgerald, they were convinced that the night guard was now William Afton, and they were out to get him. So Jeremy was in for a pretty rough ride over them 5 nights. And things only got worse, because if you remember, William Afton is actually here to gather remnant, so in the day, he took their old spring Bonnie suit and committed another string of stabby stabs. And just like last time, he hid the bodies inside the toy variants of the animatronics. A full investigation was launched there and then, William Afton was fired, and because he was fired, they now needed a day shift guard, so Jeremy was moved to the day shift and they recruited a new night guard, Fritz Smith, who was actually Michael Afton. You see, Michael Afton had learned that his father was up to his old tricks and decided to go to the location to try and catch him out and get his revenge. Meanwhile, the toy animatronics were now possessed by these new souls inside of them and decided to attack Jeremy Fitzgerald in the daytime, causing the bite of 87. Michael, obviously aware of the animatronics and the souls being inside of them, decided to try and tamper with them and release the spirits, although Fazbear Entertainment caught onto this and fired him immediately. This new restaurant was closed because of the missing children incident, and Fazbear Entertainment basically blamed the new versions of the animatronics, especially because they had evidence of an attack in the daytime on the security guard Fitzgerald. At this point, poor Henry Emily, who had lost his daughter originally brought back the new pizza place, was promptly fired from Fazbear Entertainment, and this is the last we really hear of him, well, until later on anyway. But Fazbear Entertainment wasn't done. Because they believed the toy animatronics were the problem, they opened a brand new restaurant, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, with the old original animatronics from the first location, and reusing them in the original restaurant and repurposing it entirely. However, William Afton learned of this grand reopening and decided to apply for a night guard there. But this time he was in a special room, a safe room, with no cameras and the animatronics unable to access this room. Now, Afton at this stage uses Shadow Freddy to lure the original animatronics to outside this room where he can dismantle them and potentially use the remnant. And if you're wondering where Shadow Freddy came from, well, remember when Afton was experimenting on his son, the crying child? Well, all that fear and agony manifested into Shadow Freddy. And since he was basically born from William Afton's tormenting, William Afton developed a connection with Shadow Freddy. Hence why he used Shadow Freddy to lure these animatronics just outside of the safe room so he can dismantle them. Although this had a massive problem for William and something he never even thought of, because he was actually dismantling the physical bodies that the spirits were in, the spirits then manifested in the real world. They appear before William in the location's safe room, and William flees into the spring bonnie suit to protect himself. But due to the worn down condition of the building and the sensitivity of the spring locks to moisture, the spring locks fail. His body is crushed against the endoskeleton in the suit, nearly killing him. In the aftermath of the situation, Freddy's closes for good, with William being sealed inside the safe room. Likely due to his exposure to Remnant, he doesn't die and becomes Springtrap. The puppet brings peace to the 4 original spirits and the crying child, resulting in the happiest day minigame. But you might be wondering, where's Mike Schmidt? Well, Mike Schmidt, who's actually Michael Afton, starts working there as a security guard under the name Mike Schmidt, and does so just before all this happens. How do I know it's just before? Because the animatronics at the end of the happiest day minigame are dismantled. The animatronics attack Michael Afton, thinking he is William. He is fired at some point, likely due to his condition after Sister location. But during his time as the security guard in the original Five Nights at Freddy's location, he starts to get haunted by Golden Freddy. And if you remember rightly, Golden Freddy is actually his brother, the crying child, where he constantly keeps trying to tell his brother, "It's me," via this message. With all out of the way, Freddy Fazbear's is finally closed until a good 30 years later, where in 2023, Fazbear Fright was born by a guy called Phone Dude. Now, Fazbear Fright is a horror attraction / haunted house to pay homage to scare people based off an old urban legend and rumours regarding Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the associated events. And inside is made to look like the old decrepit Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and it does a pretty good job. But to keep this place safe, they're going to need no other than a security guard. And who is this security guard? Michael Afton. So in order to make this attraction as authentic as possible, Phone Dude and his friends were ransacking the original restaurants found out throughout the country. But obviously there wasn't much left in terms of functional animatronics, especially as they were dismantled in the original location, so they were finding broken parts here and there until they learned of the safe room locations inside of the pizza places. Needless to say, the next day they find one of these safe rooms, and who do they find inside and bring back to this haunted scare location? You've got it, Springtrap. Mike has just spent the past several decades looking for this guy, and he is brought to him. Can you imagine how he feels at this stage? This finally gives Michael a chance to end things with his father, so he decides to burn down the entire attraction with Springtrap in it. There's only one problem though. The Remnant keeps bringing Springtrap back to life. And at this point, the entire Afton shtick is "I always come back," so that fire doesn't keep him down for long. Now remember I said earlier Henry will pop back up, and this is the point where he does. Henry, having learned William's plans and learned all about Remnant from the research computers, knows that there are animatronics out there with these kids' souls inside of them, and has a plan to relinquish this control and put them to rest. Because when Fazbear Fright was being made, they disrupted the peace and souls of the original animatronics by moving their dismantled parts to this new location. Not to mention you still have the puppet and the old toy animatronics. So being one of the original owners of the original materials and all the animatronics, he easily got his hands on them after Fazbear's Fright, including all the research from William Afton on Remnant. And what does he plan to do with all this? That's right, open another Fazbear Entertainment restaurant! So in his master plan, he would impersonate William Afton and lure in these animatronics. And once he has all the animatronics with souls inside, he then put them in a vent maze under the pizzeria and then eventually burn them all to the ground. Now, Henry couldn't be the one to run this place because 1, Springtrap is still out there and would know Henry's running the place so it would never come, and 2, the other animatronics would also know that the co-owner was running this gig, and not William Afton, who they would come looking for. So they decide to hire a franchise owner, and who is that going to be, I wonder? Good old Mikey boy, Michael Afton. This aligned perfectly with Michael's goals, which was to set all the animatronics free, and at the same time getting revenge on his father. And his plan worked. Over the course, he brought in Molten Freddy, which was all the fun times minus Circus Baby, Scrap Baby, which was Circus Baby. After leaving Enid, she was able to fix herself, with Enid turning into Molten Freddy. Scraptrap, which is a really interesting one because it's Springtrap, but he's kind of fixed himself after the fire because of the remnant he was able to regenerate. And Lefty, which is probably the most interesting one of them all, because you see, Lefty was an animatronic that Henry had built, and Henry built this animatronic to put the puppet inside using electricity. And yes, Henry was indeed aware that the puppet was indeed his daughter, Charlotte. With everything now in place, he can begin his plan, and he can burn it all to the ground, leaving escape routes for all employees. But he'd also learned that Michael was indeed Michael Afton, and he realized that Michael was obviously not himself. So he figured that Michael would also want this to end for himself and burn with them all. There was just one massive problem with this. The research notes he was using, which were William Afton's, were incomplete, because it was theorized that heat would be able to move the spirits on unwillingly. But that is incorrect. If the spirits don't want to move on, they're not going to, fire or not. And there was a few spirits in particular who were extremely unhappy about trying to be moved on. Cassidy, who shared the golden Freddy with the crying child, was very unhappy about this, as they really wanted William Afton to suffer for all the murder he'd committed. So during that fire sequence, they attached themselves to William Afton's soul and made him relive all the nightmares of every animatronic, over and over again. As well as several others. The crying child hadn't fully moved on, Elizabeth because her father was still alive and she wanted closure for him, not to mention Charlie in the puppet, and let's not forget Mike, whose goal was to put everyone at rest. How can he move on knowing that? So none of them really moved on at all, so that fire didn't really do anything, and it definitely didn't stop Fazbear Entertainment, because just a few short years after, they started the construction of the Mega Pizzaplex and got hugely successful. But because they got successful, all the deaths and controversy started to come back up and bring their reputation down, so they needed to combat this. So they hired an indie development company to make games on these horror events, to mock them and kind of discredit them and fool people into believing they were never real in the first place. Obviously, they could never be found out that they were the ones who hired this original developer to create these games, and after several years went by, they decided to make a VR game to combine all the events into one. And to help with this process, they give them a program called Mimic 1, as well as some old hardware that the developers used to help construct the game. Now, before we go any further, it's very important that I explain what Mimic 1 actually is. Now, back when animatronics were at their peak back in the 1980s with Fredbear's Family Diner, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, some guy decided to make his own animatronic using a program called Mimic 1. The Mimic was programmed to copy David's actions, which was actually the creator's son, which had then earned the robot its name and kept David entertained by copying him and learning from him. But in short, David ends up dying young because his ball rolls into the road and is hit by a car trying to retrieve it. The creator, who's called Edwin, is overcome with grief at the loss of his young son, and the mimic, acting like David, from whom it learned its behaviours, infuriates him. As a result, Edwin attacks the mimic and leaves it in a broken state. But due to its programming, it learns the violent behaviour of Edwin, and a killer instinct is added to its code. Now, even though it was deactivated, Fazbear Entertainment decided to keep this animatronic for later use, as well as Rage kinda being like Remnant, but this becomes extremely important later on. Now that they have the Mimic 1 program in the game and the old circuit boards, they were ready to continue making the VR experience, except there was one problem. The circuit boards they were using in the game actually came from an animatronic which they found in a fire. Yes, that fire. And whoever gave this company them circuit boards knew exactly what they were doing, because William Afton's presence infected this game. And in doing so, he was able to escape the reoccurring Cassidy nightmare. William then hijacks the Mimic 1 program and creates the Glitch Trap program. The Glitch Trap program is basically a digital reconstruction of his conscience created within the game's code. Glitch Trap attempts to influence mind control several employees at the company, including several beta testers. Another employee working at the company discovers Glitch Trap's presence through both her own experiences and her observations of the beta testers. She creates audio logs in the forms of tapes in order to document it all, but Glitch Trap gains control of the tapes and begins using them as a means to escape back into the real world. At this point, Fazbear Entertainment has already begun construction on its brand new Fazbear Entertainment complex, as well as developing an animatronic delivery service where people are able to hire out animatronics and other entertainment goods. Now, a virus makes its way into this delivery service, possibly Glitch Trap, and people start being attacked by animatronics from within the service, so that is eventually and promptly shut down. At this stage, the Mega Pizzaplex is well under construction, and they decide to build it on top of no other than Henry Emily's old pizzeria restaurant. But before they do this, they actually bring in the Mimic, and they use the Mimic to create all the endoskeletons they're ever going to need for the Pizzaplex, and that is a lot. But just like before, the Mimic is filled with rage, so it decides to go on a complete rampage, killing several people in the process. And doing what they do best, Fazbear Entertainment decides to keep this Mimic dead and buried in the old pizzeria, locking it away and pouring concrete all over the top of it, and then building the brand new Pizzaplex Pizzaplex over the top of that. It's never getting out. Until later. But whilst the Pizzaplex was still being built, the VR game continued to move forward. And at this stage, Vanessa is well and truly embedded in the program. She basically finds out what Glitch Trap is, but by then it's too late. Glitch Trap appears to be released into the real world at the end of the game, possibly taking over the mind of the Tape Girl, aka Vanessa. And when the construction of the Mega Pizzaplex is completed, she's enlisted there. But because she's under the control of Glitch Trap starts accessing sensitive information inside the Pizzaplex. And thus Vanessa starts acting extremely strangely. This prompts Fazbear Entertainment to send her to therapy sessions where we can listen to her recordings on tape. And while being influenced by Glitch Trap, Vanessa decides to build the costume called Vanny, which pays tribute to William Afton's original Spring Bonnie costume because they're both bunnies. William would then use the Glitch Trap program to continue to control Vanessa to conduct several murders and gather enough remnant to put back into his original body, because they have his original body, believe it or not, downstairs in the basement of the Pizzaplex, which Vanny and Freddy recovered from the burned down Henry Pizzeria restaurant, which the pizzeria was conveniently built on top of. Vanny being the name of the bunny is also the name of the mask she wears. Vanny, or the Virtual Augmented Neural Network Integration, whew, it's a mouthful. This is an AR/augmented reality which technicians would use to manipulate various technological pieces around the Pizzaplex. It worked by implanting a lobe into your brain, which would then interface with your brain and show you visual elements which wasn't really there. Oh, and to top it all off, it was connected to Glitch Trap, but more on that later. Running around the Pizzaplex is a boy named Gregory. Gregory, for all sense, is a robot, and let me explain why. Throughout this entire story, you've heard everything about William Afton and his sons, but nothing about William Afton's wife. She, being now the sole survivor of the Freddy Fazbear Entertainment logo, is the CEO of the entire company. She owns all the rights and everything else, and having all of her children taken away from her, she basically wanted to remake her family, and she started with Gregory as a robot. She had all of Afton's technology and built herself a robot son. She was also the one who hired Vanessa to help bring back her dead husband from the grave. Gregory's job in the Pizzaplex was also to keep an eye on Vanessa, especially during her therapy sessions, and if the therapist got too close, Gregory would kill them off. We all know the Aftons are not a fully functional family. Mrs. Afton's goal would eventually be to have Vanessa as Elizabeth, Gregory as her son the crying child, William Afton/Glitch Trap back in his original form, but that would leave Michael, but that's something we'll talk about later. She was using the Mega Pizzaplex as a way to gather remnant and capital to fund this entire little make-believe venture of hers, as there were several kids already missing in the Pizzaplex. During his time in the Pizzaplex, Gregory makes friends with a young girl called Cassie, who's the daughter of one of the technicians who works in the Pizzaplex, when noticing she's alone at her birthday party. This is something which will be relevant later. If you remember what I said earlier, Cassidy was keeping William Afton inside a purgatory/hell, playing over and over again, but he escaped into this augmented world, and because Cassidy attached her soul to him, she also came along with him, but William Afton trapped her inside of the Princess Quest. And the Princess Quest arcade machines actually serves as an access point for the Glitch Trap program, but more on that later. As we know, Vanny and Freddy went down to the original Pizzaplex to find Michael Afton's original body, and in doing so, in his own words, cleared the way down there and found himself. He found Michael Afton. Well, his spirit anyway, and Michael Afton's spirit then goes inside of Freddy. And at the same time, the crying child's spirit was also down there, which found its way into Gregory. Now you might be wondering how them spirits were actually down there. Well, they were there from the burned Henry Pizzeria restaurant, remember? Which is built on top of. So in essence, Freddy is now possessed by Michael, and Gregory is now possessed by the crying child. Because of this, Gregory was able to break free of Glitch Trap's control. And throughout FNAF itself, the souls of the animatronics which are possessed have terrible memories. So Gregory is struggling to remember anything, and to avoid capture, hides out in the Pizzaplex, where he tries to make sense of everything, putting staff bots back together, post-it notes, everything to help his memory return. The same thing goes for Freddy, because obviously with Gregory now missing, they put out a command to all animatronics to try and recapture him. Because when Freddy spots Gregory, he glitches out because of the soul inside of him, Michael. But in doing so, reset Freddy to safe mode, which was a good thing and a bad thing, because it suppressed Michael, but also suppressed Glitch Trap, who by this point was everywhere in the pizzeria and controlling some of the animatronics. Not to mention still controlling Vanessa, who was also sent to find Gregory. They meet up and journey through the Pizzaplex together to try and escape, but in doing so, they uncover the truth of the original Henry Pizzeria below the surface. As they venture further below the Pizzaplex, Michael/Freddy starts to regain some of his memories, and how the source of it all was basically William, where they eventually find him in the old restaurant. Fortunately, the old burners which Henry installed were still there, so they decided to burn him to the ground just like all previous attempts. In doing so, they decide to boot it out of the Pizzaplex, but not before the blob gets hold of William Afton. Now if you remember, all the other animatronics and souls were also there. They kind of created an amalgamation of parts together like Ennard, and all their hatred and rage for William Afton is fused into one massive massive blob, which then reaches out and grabs William Afton, absorbing him into the entire blob program. At this point, it cuts William Afton off from the entire Pizzaplex and the Glitch Trap program, leaving the only thing left, the Mimic, which is also hiding down there conveniently. Shortly after this, the Mega Pizzaplex closes for refurbishment, and this is where Cassie's father comes into play. Just before the Pizzaplex falls into disrepair, Cassie's father was training to become a Fazbear technician using the VR technology they used to brainwash Vanessa using the Glitch Trap and Mimic program. Cassie's father uses this program to help repair Roxy from her original shattered state into her ruined state, but also when he used this program, he actually discovered the Glitch Trap and Mimic program, and that Vanny was very much still alive in the Pizzaplex. He had found out the sinister plans and what was actually going to happen in the Pizzaplex and what had happened, but before he had a chance to tell anybody, they trapped his consciousness with the Glitch Trap program inside the VR world and used him to power some of the staff bots. The Mimic, also being part of this program, used Cassie's father in the staff bot to deliver the Vanny mask to Cassie. All this will become clear why later on. Now, the blob burrowing throughout the Pizzaplex causes massive earthquakes, but it doesn't actually leave the Pizzaplex because Cassie sees it when she's going down the stairs on her way to find Gregory. Because Gregory at some point leaves the Pizzaplex with Freddy, but will have to return because Freddy cannot live outside the Pizzaplex without a recharge station. He states this himself. But on returning, they encounter the Mimic and they head back down to the Mimic's room, lock him away for good using the MXES program, and leave the Pizzaplex for good, presumably finding a way to recharge Freddy outside of the Pizzaplex. But the Mimic, now having encountered Gregory, is able to do what it does best, mimic being Gregory, and lures Cassie, the girl we talked about earlier, back to the Pizzaplex to try and help her friend. At this stage, you might also be wondering what has happened to Vanny. Well, she is actually still in the Pizzaplex because we know she's been there because it's completely vandalized by her, and it's something we'll touch on later. But Cassie, having seen the missing child posters and being contacted by what she thinks is Gregory, telling her that he's in the now abandoned, closed down Pizzaplex. The real Gregory, however, caught wind of this scheme from the Mimic and tried to contact Cassie himself to warn her all about it, but was unsuccessful. Cassie, having made her way inside the Pizzaplex, found herself with a Vanny mask, and the Vanny mask does what it does best, implanted that node into her brain so she's able to interface with the AR network. But because the original program had Glitch Trap and the Mimic program inside of it with no Glitch Trap now around, Mimic was the only one available and was able to manipulate the program and manipulate Cassie. And he basically got her to deactivate all the security nodes which were keeping him locked up in his little basement. The program that was essentially keeping Mimic in his little cage, the MXES, was not very happy about this and tried to stop Cassie, under the Mimic's guidance, from deactivating it. She deactivated it anyway and hit down a massive concrete wall, revealing not Gregory, but the Mimic. Luckily for her, one of the Glamrocks came to her rescue and saved her from the Mimic's clutches, Roxy, who happened to remember her from her birthday party and one of her favourite animatronics, and really likes Cassie. At this point, Gregory is now able to get through to Cassie and explains the entire situation and helps her escape from the Pizzaplex via an elevator. But at this point, just as you think you're escaping, the Mimic is able to hijack the intercom inside the elevator, which Gregory is talking to you through, and impersonate Gregory. At this point, the Mimic then cuts off the elevator, which sends you hurtling towards the ground. Now, at this point, there are various explanations to what actually happens at the end of the Ruin DLC. You have the Scooper ending, the ending on the hill, and the ending where Roxy just turns up. But part of the fun of FNAF is actually theorising and getting involved with the community, so I'd like you to come up with your own ending and let me know in the comments. And do you even agree with my timeline? I basically think this is the definitive timeline, although I have combined a lot of other YouTubers' timelines in there and my own, and I think that's the best way to go about it, because you might like bits of things from my timeline, bits of things from another timeline, and combine and make your own. That's what the FNAF community is all about. It is a community. I really hope you've enjoyed this video because it took me absolutely ages to make, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe because I got plenty of FNAF content on the channel. I'm working really hard and really don't want to let you guys down. And if you like this, you'll love my cut content video and iceberg video. Go check them out now. I'm Twisty, the Twisted Animatronic, and stay safe out there, superstars.